Hey everybody, welcome to EMS Office Hours. I am Jim Hoffman. Thanks so much for joining me on a Sunday morning. I know everybody's time is very short and limited, so I appreciate anyone popping in here live for taking the time to do that. And I'm joined today by Mike Chanat, right?
Yep.
Uh, Mike, again, thank you for popping in on a Sunday as well. I know a lot of times, we're all busy and but I like to try to accommodate people that come join me on the show, when they have their schedule. Because I know it's hard to get people on. But thanks for joining me.
My pleasure. You've just actually exhibited the very first quality of leadership is you're making yourself available and accommodating to the people that matter to you.
Sure.
And that's one of the things that I try to teach people is you always want to make sure that you're listening to them and that you're giving them the time of day and their world is important to you and should be important to you. So
Yeah,
thank
it's
you.
right. It's and that's really why I want to have you. I wanted to have you on today because you see a lot of stuff online about EMS leadership and coaching and mentoring and stuff like that, and you get a lot of companies even that sort of tout this belief that they are all about leadership and mentoring their employees, but a lot of times they're really just putting out policies for people to follow and not really giving employees any sort of mentoring or coaching or anything like that. It's like, oh, here's a new policy. I'm going to coach you to do new policy, but that's it. I'm not going to lead you to do it. Right. And like you said,
Exactly.
I think people feel like the managers and corporate entities and stuff like that feel as if they're not getting heard, by management. It's like, oh, the boss told me to do this, I have to do it, but there's no real leadership in that at all. And I wanted to have you on because, and I've had other people on too who are big into leadership. I had Walter Dusseldorp. I'm not sure if
Yep.
you know him or not.
Yep. Well, Walter and I work together, so know Walter very well.
Yeah, I had him on, a little bit. I helped Walter years ago with the Hudson Valley website that they did.
Mm-hmm.
But it's I like seeing people who have a passion for it, and to sort of give it out to the masses, try to help people out. And when I saw you sort of getting into this on LinkedIn, actually,
Yes.
I was like, wow, this is really cool that he's getting into this, and it's not my forte. I'm more into like helping people pass tests and kind of fine tuning their skills and knowledge base. And so I let the leadership part for other people.
Mm-hmm.
I see a lot of people that get into leadership. I do leadership, and also I do CMEs, and also I do this, and also I do that. And it's like, okay, but what's your real passion, right? So when I saw you doing that on LinkedIn, I thought it was just a great opportunity to connect with you and have you on and talk about that. You want to talk a little bit about what it is that you do before we get into any questions or anything like that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I appreciate the time. I work with my ideal person, my ideal client that I work with is the new EMT, the new paramedic, somebody who's just starting out. I do also work with people who are midway into their career and may have like lost that flame. It might have snuffed a little or not burned as bright. And I'm here to help fan those flames and reignite their passion. So what I'm trying to do with the new people is give them something that I didn't have. And the names that I'm going to drop, you are very familiar with because they were there when we were back in the 90s in Brooklyn. Abdo Namod was my very, very first paramedic partner. I remember him welcoming me and making me feel a part of the team. It was like the third Friday in September in 1989. I can remember that day. It was sunny. I got in and he extended his hand and he shook my hand and says, "Don't worry, everybody's got to have their first day." And I remember how I felt. And everybody always talks about that Maya Angelou quote, they'll forget what you said and you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. So I remember how I felt then, and I also remember several ways along the way. Most recently was about 4 or 5 years ago when I came to Rockland Paramedic Services, or RPS, where one of the new EMTs welcomed me. And it was nice. Yes, I had 30 years in EMS at that point, but I was new to the company, didn't know too many of the people other than some of my former students. but they weren't around at that time. So it was nice to be welcomed. And this is where I go. I sit down with the new EMTs and paramedics. We work on what are their goals, what are their passions, where do they want to go? Because a lot of times they don't have a career path. Like Abdo at that time was just a paramedic, but he made his way, as you know, all the way up to the chief in New York City EMS, which is not a small accomplishment.
Yeah.
So I want to help people make the best of it, whether they're using EMS as a stepping stone and they want to go on to somewhere else, whether they've maybe injured themselves and they can no longer be in the field and they want to look at options, whether it's to go teach, whether it's to go into another profession. I'm always there to help them map that way and how to set up goals so that they get there. In addition, I like to speak to like volunteer agencies and smaller agencies that are willing to listen, that want to learn about what I call the key three, which is communication, mindset, and empathy. We're all familiar with CME, which is why I kind of took that CME approach and put my spin on it. Instead of continuing medical education, I like to help people develop their communication skills, which also is a lot more than just listening or speaking, and how we can develop it and practice it. Longevity is something that people are always worried about, and that's where mindset kind of comes in. So we talk about how can you build a resilient mindset. I know on one of your recent podcasts, you were talking about the girl from Northwell that she thinks about what she did during the day as she's driving home, and then she just dumps it and leaves it at the front door. You got to be able to build up rapport with friends and other people to have a support network. If you can't leave it at the door, you want to be able to maybe have a mindset of, hey, this is a great day. I did my best, instead of, oh, I'm beating myself up for having a horrible job. No, don't think about what went wrong. Think about what went right, because we're trained to do everything right. It's just that we always work so hard against ourselves. We want to get out of our mind and be able to move forward with that. And then the last part of it is the empathy. It's whether it's empathy for your people, your workers. As a lieutenant, I try to ask my people what's going on in their personal lives, find out what's going on, make those personal connections. I do the same thing with my patients. Most recently, I had a elderly patient that's one of my community paramedic patients, where I see her for wellness and follow-up checks at home. And the job of the community paramedicine is to try to keep them out of the hospital.
Right.
And in this particular case, 911 had gotten activated on a day that I was working that station. And I happened to walk in, and this isn't her real name, but I'm going to say, Mrs. Jones, hey, how are you doing? You know, I usually try to keep you home if I can, and we don't want to do it, but I really do think that you need to go to the hospital today based on this, this, and that. And she had said, well, I'd rather not, and was going on. And she was in a debate with her daughter, with my partner, with the EMTs that were there. And through listening, I heard her say, I'd rather not go. She didn't say no. She'd just rather not. And I spoke to her and I said, I understand that. Nobody would rather go to the hospital, but I think you know that you need to go and you need the help. And she said, she started to nod, and she said, okay, you can start the IV, you can do what you have to do. And we took her to the hospital, and she did, in fact, have a septic infection going on. Her blood count was, her white blood cells were 24,000 and through the roof. Her lactic was at a 4, and 3 is where we started being concerned. So a lot of things that we were able to get her to where she went. And about 2 hours later, on another job, we ran into the cops, and the cop goes, oh, that was a great job at convincing her to go. And that's all part of the empathy. But where I got the empathy and was able to convince her is I listened to her words. And that's the part of the communication. We made a genuine connection. We were going back and forth. And this is kind of one of the things that helps me with the longevity. You and I have both been in this field for a very long time. You and I are probably about 30 years now that we've known each other. And we're still doing this. We still have a passion. And I want the next generation and the generation after that to be able to do it. I've done a lot of teaching, probably about 20 years worth. And I always joke that I have grand students and great grand students, because a lot of my students have gone on to become instructors and ICs, and they've taught a lot of new generations. And what's funny is when I run into some of these people as my partners, I'll say, hey, who was your EMT instructor, or who was your medic instructor? And they go, so-and-so. And I go, oh, did you know I was so-and-so's instructor when they were a medic or when they were a student? And you make that connection, and you watch their eyes open up and the glow. And it's like, yes, it's a proud parent moment, proud instructor moment, proud provider moment, but it's something that we do. And that's part of the challenge of being a leader. You don't necessarily need to have that title, though right now I am a lieutenant. Long before that, I had people coming to me asking me about stuff. I had people saying, hey, listen, can I ask you about this? What do you think about this? And it was about career changes, about possibly going to FDNY for EMS, possibly about moving out of state and taking a dispatcher's job or a firefighter's job or a paramedic's job somewhere else. And you know you're doing things right when people are coming to you for their first opinion or for that valued opinion, because they know you're going to create that you've already created that safe environment for them. And they're able to come to you and they trust that you're not going to judge them. They trust that you're going to listen to them, and they trust that you're going to give them the best advice and that you have their genuine interests at heart.
It's funny, some of the things you talk about, and like the CME thing, I can cross it off my list here of things I want to talk about with you. The whole CME and how you kind of made that into that communication, mindset, empathy type thing. I did the same to my main website, EMS SEO. I made the SEO success, education, and opportunity. And, kind of all those sort of tying together. And when you say things about listening and being there for the people that you're working with. I worked at a place where they started out through the onboarding process of working there. At every meeting, before they started anything, they would ask around the table how everybody's doing that day, to get, like you said, find out where they are, where their mindset is, where they are that day, personally, professionally, so you kind of know what to expect from them that day. And then they encourage us to do that with our partners. And I started to do that, not every day, because some days you log on, you get a call right away. But the days that you had a few minutes, while you're checking out the ambulance, you ask the person, hey, how's it going? What's happening? Because maybe they had a bad day, the day before, and they're kind of bringing that to work a little bit. So if they're a little short or they're a little distant or quiet and whatnot, you can kind of realize why that is. And then maybe even help them sort of, get past it or treat them a different way to figure out how to get over, help them get over that aspect of what's going on so they can work better, with you during that day. And another thing, and you talk about, having people that sort of affected you. I remember I worked with Tommy Brennan. I'm not sure if you remember.
Tommy, yes. Tommy was my first midnight partner for 6 months.
I remember working with him, and it's funny, you talk about the whole thing about stepping stones and things like that in EMS and moving on. And I remember the one thing he said the first time I worked with him is, he's like, I'm so tired of hearing people talk about their 5-year plan to get out of EMS.
Yeah.
He was like, EMS is it's an honorable profession. And, people are so quick to try to find a way out instead of trying to be better at the job, and he meant it in all around, not just in skills and knowledge, but also like you're talking about being a leader, passing on what you know to other people, because it does kind of suck when you start someplace new and nobody's sort of welcoming you or, sort of letting you know that, okay, I know you're new and maybe you've been doing it for 10, 15, 20 years, but you're still new to this agency, right? So it's still that apprehension you have as a new employee. So when you've got someone that approaches you that way, it does start your path at the organization a lot easier versus, getting thrown in and, here are the patients, here's the equipment, have at it. You know what I mean? And it's just, I feel there's not enough of that going on. And I see it in Facebook groups all the time. I see it, in many, many different social media platforms. I get emails from people that are members of my website that say this is something that they struggle with all the time, that they feel like they are sort of the outsider type thing. So you have mentors or people that you work with, like we're talking about, that sort of maybe not take you under their wing, but give you these little pearls of information. Like for me, that must have been a comment and discussion I had with Tommy going back maybe at least 20 years. But I still remember it, a lot more than I remember the first time I remember how to do an IO. You know what I mean? But I remember that type of conversation. So when you talk about being a leader, what are some of the um, challenges that you face? Let's say, do you notice a specific challenge when you try to be somebody's mentor or try to lead somebody, like you said, to reach their goals and things like that? Um, what is like a main challenge you feel you have? Is it resistance from the person? Is it them thinking they know everything already and then you don't really have anything to bring to the table? Like, what do you feel that the biggest thing?
Well, that's one of the biggest things you hit right on the head right there. Being a leader begins with leading yourself and having an open mindset. And I just want to take a little sidebar so that kind of puts some of this stuff into context. Um, when I was first looking into and delving into what makes a leader, what are the characteristics, I did an internet search and I came up with 57, 58 different characteristics or traits or skills of a leader.
Mm,
I kind of was able to distill them down, and I did kind of, you look through my posts, you'll see like a top 10. These were the 10 most frequent. And then when I looked again at it, it's like that Albert Einstein quote, you don't understand it fully until you can explain it simply. And I realized that whether it's you're looking at the sample size of 58 or the sample size of 10, they could all be grouped into these three things: the communication, mindset, and empathy. And with that starts with leading yourself. So if the individual that I would like to help doesn't have an open mindset, they're not receptive to feedback. And you'll remember this if you've done any FTO stuff or you've had precepted students, is they always come out with these sheets that you need to evaluate them. And one of the questions inevitably on there is, was the student receptive to feedback?
yeah.
So the biggest challenge is and it's like any of our patients, when you had any of the people that were addicts, whether to alcohol or to drugs, if they didn't want to change, there was nothing we were going to do. We'd still provide the best care, the most empathetic care that we could, but they're not going to change. And it's the same thing with students or mentees that you're working with. If they do come in thinking they know it, kind of like when I used to teach paramedic refreshers, that was the most challenging because you have people coming in with knowledge, some of them thinking they know it all, or there's nothing that you can possibly learn. When they shut down that facade, and they build that wall in front of them, and there is nothing that's going to let them come in, that's the challenge. And you got to then start working with little conversations and figure out, why do they have this challenge? Why do they feel that they're at that point that they don't need to learn? What do they want to teach? And I'll usually try and spin it around to like, hey, teach me something. And you know what? Inevitably, they do teach something, and we find a common ground, and I try to work with that. The other ones are people who kind of put up that wall and they're defensive because people that have dealt with them previously were maybe what I kind of dubbed the screamers. They did something wrong, they got screamed at, they got yelled at, instead of somebody walking out, extending their hand, saying, hey, let's walk through this together. Let's go over it. What did you see that you did good? Would you see that you didn't do so good? What can we improve? What can I help you with? I'm here to support you. And they're not used to hearing this. They might have heard it from mom and dad, and then they came into this kind of a profession where, unfortunately, 30 years, 35 years later, there's still evidence of people eating the young. They're very critical of it. And I remember working with a new medic, and I sat in my head and I did the math of how long he had been a medic, meaning that since he got certified, and he was sitting next to me. And then I sat, how many refreshers have I sat through at 80 hours each? And I told the student, and not the student, but he was a medic at that point. I told him, I've had more time sitting in a classroom doing my refresher than you have on the streets. The only way that you're going to get this experience, and I'm not saying that to you that I want you to feel intimidated. I want you to understand that I've gotten to where I've gotten because I have the time. You might be able to read all the books. You might be able to nowadays look everything up on your palm, on your phone, and get the information quickly. But how you take that knowledge and you apply it, that only comes through experience. And experience comes with a lot of mistakes, comes with a lot of failures. And as long as you learn from those mistakes, you learn from those failures, you're able to take that knowledge and apply it and make it wisdom. And
Yeah.
I try to be that guide for them, help them with some wisdom to say, hey, look, you might want to try it this way. You might want to do that. This is how you're going to improve yourself, because I'd like to see you take my place in a few years as somebody that people are going to be coming to, somebody that they're going to be asking questions, because I know you have that potential. You also have to believe in the people. You have to see through their facades that they put up, trying to be the tough guy, the new guy, and make it look like they're experienced. You need to reach in deep, and you need to make that empathetic connection with them. Once you make that connection with them, that bond is going to be there forever. And when you light somebody's fire and then you fan it and you get it to be bright, you watch them glow, and it's an incredible feeling. And that's what I try to do. And the biggest challenge is providing that oxygen or that fuel to make that fire burn, and providing additional resources to make it burn brighter and bigger. And when you have the people that are against it, the biggest thing is to find out why. What happened to them in the past? Is it PTSD? Is it previous preceptors? Is it a previous agency? And you got to just work with them and work around them and show them that we're here to start a new relationship. We're going to start a new environment where your words, your thoughts, your concerns, your emotions are valued. And I'm not going to make fun of you. I'm not going to ridicule you. I'm not going to belittle you. I want to build you up. I want to put my hands together and give you that alley-oop step up, and you can rise up that ladder above me. I'm not about the ego of a rank and a title and stuff like that. I had plenty of my students who became CICs before I did. I was a CLI, or a certified lab instructor, for a very long time, and I didn't feel like I had it. And I don't want people to struggle. I want them to understand that they are innate leaders. It's within them, and I'm here to bring it out. From that very first day in EMT class where they teach you CPR, what do we teach people to do? We teach them to delegate. Hey, you with the red shirt, go call 911. Hey, you, push faster, push harder. Hey, you, get a better. You're delegating. I need you to do that.
Yeah, and
You're
now
already
it's even
becoming
more delegation with the way they run the crew, the crew type style CPR and
style since,
everything.
yeah, and
You
the
know,
last 10 or 15 years when the AHA has evolved to that style of running it as a team and having a team lead. That is where I want them to understand. They just kind of go through that and they don't realize what they've just done.
yeah,
And I want them to realize that you are a leader. You just proved to me by passing this practical and sharing the knowledge on that written exam that you understand what it is to lead. Now I want you to apply it. I don't want you to be afraid. I understand you're going to be afraid. I'm here to help you. I'll let you go down a rabbit hole, but I won't let you go all the way down. I'll grab you by your collar, pull you back. I will help you, keep you on your 2 feet. And if you get knocked down, I'll offer my hand to help you stand up, and we'll get going again and take a few steps together. I will be there at your side and behind you to support you until you're ready to go on your own. And it's when you get through these different challenges, you start to see the people evolve. One of the things I talk to my new students every time I get them as a preceptor, mindset. I said, you need to flip that switch in your head. And I have a wonderful partner, Ashley Williams. She and I give this speech to all our students, and we tell them, you're the main center of focus today. You're it. And we usually ask them, like, what do you think yourself? What is your role? And they go, oh, well, I'm a paramedic student. I said, no, stop. Put in your mind that you are a paramedic. I know you haven't finished the class, but put in your mind that you're a paramedic. Start believing you're a paramedic. And then once they get that, and if the switch goes off or the light bulb goes on, they step into scenarios and they're not hiding as a third person in the back. They actually start walking up. They start taking charge. They start doing. Why?
yeah,
Because you believed in them and you changed their mindset. They went from a negative mindset or a closed, fixed mindset of I'm just a student to
right.
I am the EMT. I am the paramedic. And they start leading and they start doing.
What's funny is, I think back over the years, and a lot of things that I've learned from, partners that, and even patients for that matter, at times
Mhm.
where you not necessarily they were trying to lead me or to anything like that, but it was something that, like you mentioned before, about having the experience and thinking that you know everything. And a few times when that's somebody has kind of corrected me or brought something to light, I was like, wow, that is so true. And I've learned from that. And I ended up not ever doing it again. When I was an EMT, and I was an EMT for like 3 years,
Mhm.
and I had a partner who was part time, and he was doing a regular job, doing something else, full time, and we had a fracture or whatever, and I put the ice pack on, and I didn't put it on the exact way that he would have liked to do it. And he was like, "Oh, you should wrap that up in something first before you put it on the skin. It's too cold." And then I ended up afterwards telling him, "I've been doing this full time. You're only a part timer. I've been doing fractures all the time." And after the call, calmly, and professionally, he said to me, he goes, he goes, it's not necessarily the how much experience you have in doing something. It's the right way and the wrong way.
Yes.
And that kind of struck me for a minute, and I had to like go and start looking up on best practices for applying a splint and an ice pack and all that stuff, and stuff you don't necessarily learn in an EMT school, right? Little nuances like that.
Hmm.
But then I learned that, and I realized that he was, in the end, he was right, and I never went and did that again. And the same thing you mentioned about telling the new student, or that think that you're a paramedic, don't think like you're a student, and then they take more initiative when you do that, and they're not that third person in the back. I remember I started working for an agency in New Jersey, and like my first day, my preceptor and his partner, they were both, real old soldier dog type, medics. And
Hmm.
we start getting in the ambulance, and I'm going in the back, right? That's where the newbie goes.
Yep.
He goes in the back and sits in this captain's chair, right?
Yep.
And his partner goes, "Where you going?" I'm going in the back. He goes, "No, you sit up front in the passenger seat." He goes, "I know what I'm doing. I've been here. I'm sitting in the back. You sit up front so you can see what the hell's going on." And that was the first time ever, as a student, as a new employee, or anything like that, where I sat in the front as like I was already there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was something that really, it put me in the mindset. Okay, well, yeah, I've been doing this for about 15 years now, and I know what I'm doing in the ambulance. I have to just know the nuances of where I'm going, and how the agency works and how their computer works, and talking to dispatch and stuff like that. So by then, let me sit in the front, I was able to catch on so much faster than sitting in the
Absolutely.
back and trying to peek through a little window and try to see what the hell's going on and try to listen to the dispatcher. So it's so important, like you said, to really make them feel that they're part of the bigger picture, as fast as possible. Because then I think they are open to learning more. You know.
That's it's. I can't tell you how many of the newer, whether they were EMT or paramedic orientees or students, that when I would go sit in the back of the ambulance and I'd let them sit up front, they're looking at me like, "Huh, what?" I said, "I am probably the most unique, different paramedic that you're ever going to work with. I'm unlike a majority of the people that are unfortunately out there. I don't need to sit up front. I don't need to be. I've done that. I
Yeah.
need them to experience it, and they need to get their hands wet, so to speak,
Well, it's like you
in what
said,
they're
right? You
doing."
you you want to know that you're there for them.
Yes.
That's what your role is. And I talked to a guy who wrote a book recently, and he was talking about that. About just sort of not being that sort of preceptor. You
Yeah.
know, and I think what I'm finding is that a lot of people that have been in EMS for a while, they realize the benefit of the approach that you're talking about, versus the old thing of eating your young,
Yeah.
and sink or swim type thing. I mean, when I first started in EMS, there was no such thing in a lot of places as preceptors, or uh, you know uh, uh, FTOs or anything like that. It was
Yeah.
like, oh, the first day I started, it was like, here's a radio. There goes the blue box over there, blue and white box. Get in that, and don't get in trouble.
And that's it. Yes. Yes.
You
And,
know,
and they and that's exactly the feeling that I tap into when I started way back at Lutheran in 1989. I remember back then manually typing on a piece of paper because we didn't have word processors or computers, but I was typing a sheet out that I kind of ended up putting together and using for myself when I became an instructor or a preceptor. But it was a list of all these things that I wish I had. And one of the things that I challenge the people is, you want a specific type of leader. You know what you need, but they're not there. Become that leader. Be that leader that you need now, and do that and provide that to other people is the way I try to teach them. And I remember being lost at, like you said, here's the radio, here's the keys, there's the blue and yellow box outside, go outside. And like you said, don't get in trouble. Well, what does don't get in trouble mean? Other than being legal.
Right.
Oh, you mean I got to stay within 3 blocks of my 97 or 89 or COR or CSL, whatever they want to call it.
From a lieutenant. Yeah.
Exactly. Or make sure that this doesn't happen. Make sure you do that. Make sure you fill out. I didn't know all the paperwork. I didn't know this. And it isn't until I kind of tripped over something that my partner says, oh, you've never done that? No. So when I started getting new orientees, or I started getting new people, when Lutheran started to bring back the BLS units and we had all the new EMTs that were coming in, I remember they would pair up the EMTs with one of the seasoned medics, and I happened to get the opportunity to do that. I made sure that they learned what they needed to know for working at our station, and that they learned to do it our way. And our way wasn't better. It wasn't worse. It was just different. But you don't understand the differences until either someone tells you, or unfortunately you get in trouble because you didn't know you were supposed to submit this in triplicate not in duplicate, or whatever it is. So it's stuff like that that I tap into, remembering how I felt. And I don't want somebody else to feel like that they're lost and wandering around aimlessly. So I try to be that guide at the side. I walk them through it. I show them. And I find the biggest thing is giving them a why. Make them understand. Like when we check out our Life Pack 15s, I tell them to go from left to right. And I said, you don't have to do left to right. You have to do the 3 things. But I said, the reason we do it left to right is when those 3 tests then print out on the paperwork, they'll fit nicely on our scanner bed, because we have to scan them and attach them to our tour report. Mm-hmm. So there's a why. There's no real why that you have to do it in that particular order, but why we do it that way here, they understand it. Because in class, they'll learn to do the checks and they start doing it. And I'm like, well, that's not going to fit neatly on our scanner bed. And that's the thing. You help them by explaining to them. You help them by discovering the why, giving them that why. And once they understand that why, they'll be able to apply the knowledge you're sharing with them. And going back to one thing you were talking about earlier, with you were the full-timer and you got that lesson about the ice pack from the new guy or the part-timer. Open mindset versus the fixed mindset. You were in a fixed mindset. You were like I'm the full-timer. I know. Right. You weren't open and receptive. I'm 35 plus years doing this, and I still learn from, like you said, I learn from my patients. I have conversations with them and I learn from them. I learn from the parents of the special needs kids who are much more well-versed in the electronics that come along with some of the kids that we do critical transports on. I learned from
that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah. And I learned from the new EMTs and paramedics. Why? Because I've got like 5 different versions of the protocol in my head, because every time AHA changed, every time New York City region changed, every time Nassau County, Orange County, Rockland County changed the different protocols, I've got so much stuff up there. I'm like, okay, well, which version am I currently working with? And or there might have been something that came out that was taught in class, but I haven't gotten it as part of a rollout yet. Yeah, I'm open and receptive to the students.
That's something very big. I realized too, with some of the new people that are brand new medics, and I started working with them. And when they would tell me something about something that a patient presented with and something like that I wasn't aware of, or that I didn't realize yet, I started to remind myself, you know what, okay, they're new. They might not know a lot of the nuances of things that go on in EMS, like operationally, but educationally, they might be a little bit ahead of me because they're just getting out of class. They've just learned a lot of the new stuff. They've learned new things that treatments and things like that that EMS is doing that maybe I didn't get to yet, you know. And like you said, it's having that open mindset. And I learned, you know, it probably took me about, I'm going to say, good 6-7 years in before I started having more of an open mindset to things.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
because it is. I mean, you're 100% right with that. I mean, we both can probably tell all kinds of stories about things we've learned from different people over the years, and like you said, even patients and the parents and stuff. That was something too that, you know, you realize that parents or even people that have, you know, family members that have special needs.
Yes,
They
exactly.
don't teach you all that type of stuff necessarily in EMT school or paramedic school.
Yeah.
So you can learn a lot from those family members on how to best treat that patient or transport that patient. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, I had partners that, like you said, the why type thing. You know,
Yeah.
why are we doing it this way here? Or what? I had a guy when I worked in New York Hospital. He was one of the original paramedics ever in the city, and he was showing me how he makes the stretcher. I'm like, dude, I know how to make a stretcher. Give me a break.
Yeah.
But when he got done showing me, I was like, holy cow, this is like such a great way to make the stretcher that helps transport our equipment and package the patient in a way that it looks so professional when you're coming
Absolutely.
out of a house, you're coming out of a facility, and a patient is packaged that way that you're like, wow, this looks so much better than arms hanging out and you know, the head's falling off the side of the stretcher. And you know, but he showed me a way that, and from that day, from that on, I mean, whenever I was on an ambulance, that was how I would package the patient. You know, years ago, I did a friggin' a video
Yeah.
on how to do that. You know, I made a mock stretcher up and I showed how to, you know, best make a stretcher up. You know, and that would amaze me too. When you ever see on some of these TV shows and stuff like that where they don't even have sheets on the stretcher.
No. Yeah.
It's like
Yep. Yep.
it's like a
Whether
freaking
they don't have sheets
piece
or
of
the IVs
paper.
are going the wrong way. Yep.
Yeah,
And a
I
lot
don't
of
get
times,
that.
yeah, some people they have the fitted sheets. Some of the guys will put the fitted sheets on the that they use in the EDs. They'll put those on the stretcher, but then they won't put another sheet down. And I'm like trying to explain to the people. I said, you need to put another sheet down. One, because you got to wrap them like a burrito, and you got to make
Right,
sure they're like an infant, where you put them in a swaddle.
right,
You
right.
want to make sure they're tight and comfortable so that they're not falling out. The arm doesn't flop off the stretcher. And if they're a little more violent or aggressive, you're controlling them passively.
Yes. You
But you
realize
also,
how many applications something simple like that ends up having. Like you said, a patient that might be potentially violent or something like that.
yeah,
If you can do that to them, it lessens the you know, the risk of them lashing out suddenly. It gives you a couple extra, you know, seconds to react to them, acting up and trying to
yeah,
be violent on you. You know,
exactly.
even the cardiac arrest patient, which is always my favorite, because you know, you're dealing with someone that's in a cardiac arrest, the family's upset, everyone's emotional. The last thing you want to do is show up at the hospital at the workroom in the back of the rig, and the arms and legs are flopping
You're
all
just
over the
dangling,
place, and
flopping. You pulled IV
you're pumping
lines.
on their chest, and it's like, all right, how does is that the last memory I want the family to have of not just their loved one, but also the people who took care of their loved one? So they get the bill in the mail for thousands of dollars, and they're like, oh, all I remember is this guy, you know, pulling my dad out of the back of the truck, and his
Yeah,
arm is hanging off the
yeah,
stretcher.
and yeah. We had a cardiac arrest 2 weeks ago, and we had a student, and it was while he's done numerous cardiac arrests prior to this. This was his first ALS arrest. It was the first arrest as a medic student, and Ashley and I just kind of threw him in, and she was behind him practicing, making sure he was doing the airway correctly. But afterwards, I said, "So, what did you think?" He goes, "Wow, I didn't realize all these different things." I said, "Yes. You notice how I communicated with the fire department and I asked them to set up the stretcher or where to put the reeves or how we were going to move the patient, or I was speaking out loud with Ashley and we were talking about, hey, this is what's going on. This is what I'm doing." And she was telling me, okay, I got the airway. It's here. You have to do all those communications. You have to be thinking, and you have to be that playing the chess game, not the checkers. You have to be 3 or 4 steps ahead. So that cardiac arrest situation is not only there, but it's everything around it. I wrote an article one day, and it's on my LinkedIn profile, but it was, we don't save lives, we make a difference in people's lives. And the way I explain that distinction is, even if we do everything correct, 110%, and we gave them the best, people still die.
Yeah.
However, what do we do for the family? What do we do for that youth squad member or that brand new EMT whose first arrest this is? What do we do for the family member, for the spouse? What did we do for the emergency room that had to receive this child in cardiac arrest? Did we make a difference in their lives? How we treat the body, how we treat the patient, how we treat the family members and the crews. This is all part of that leadership challenge. Is, are we making a difference? Are we setting them up for future success? Because we're going to talk to them and say, hey, listen, I understand you're a little upset and that you think everything went bad because the patient didn't survive. We didn't get ROSC. But hey, what went right? You got in there immediately. You placed the pads on. You assessed correctly. You got that airway. You did what you had to do. All these positive things, build them up so that, okay, reality is we don't save everybody's life, but reality also is we did the right thing and I feel good about what I did. Not, oh, I lost another one. Because I got caught up in some of those little traps and being bummed out. Probably most recently was a 3-year-old pediatric patient that really kind of got on me. And it wasn't until I had that mindset shift, understanding the mindset of what went right instead of dwelling on what went wrong, and getting to people. A lot of times I find that the salty people, the people we talk about, you want to talk about challenges, are the ones that are locked down on, oh, F this, F that, everything's wrong, nothing goes right, we don't do anything, we're just hauling slabs of meat. People who have that negative attitude, and you and I, you're smiling and laughing because we all know these people. We've worked with them. We might have even kind of
I am that person sometimes.
Yeah, I was going to say we might have been there at that point. But what we need to do is we need to change that mindset. We need to realize, like Tommy Brennan told you, we're in a noble profession. I have so many people that are in my circle on LinkedIn that are telling me, oh, this is wonderful, this is great. None of them are in EMS. A good portion of them are coaches, but they respect what I do because we are a noble profession. We do make a difference in people's lives, or patient, or not necessarily always the patient, but in people's lives. How we interact with the public, how we interact with the schools, how we interact with the police and the fire. We need to build those relationships, build those rapports, and bringing it back to CME. It's all about communication. It's these little conversations we have from day one, whether we're meeting up at Store 24 or 7-Eleven or whatever, the Wawa, wherever the local hangout is, or we're meeting at a central location. Having these little coffee breaks and conversations between jobs, or even at the ER, hanging outside. This is where you build up teams. This is where you build up rapport. And this is where we get to be stronger together. And we're able to make that difference for the people. And I want the people to understand, wave at the ambulance from the other service or the other department. We're in this together. We're all EMTs and paramedics. We're all first responders. It's not us and them. That's another article that I wrote, was as long as we have us and them, we will never be better.
It's funny, I think about a lot of the things that we've been talking about this morning, and it comes back to, like you said, the communication as one of the biggest keys here. For on both sides, and I've realized that, over the years as well, and even when people that are members of my website that email me or they message me and stuff like that, I try to get back to them as soon as I can with the information that they're looking for, because I want to keep that communication going. I want anyone that's a member of my website or that follows me on social media that messages me to go, oh, this guy's just all smoke and mirrors. He talks to this, he's got a podcast, whatever, but he never gets back to you.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, I just had someone this morning who was having an issue with something, and I got back to her right away. She contacted me. I got back to her right away, and she was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe on a Sunday morning at 7 a.m. you're responding to me so quickly.
Yep.
I really appreciate that. I hate to bother you." I'm like, "No, it's not a bother. I want to make sure that you get what you need when you need it as fast as you can, you know." And because I know that there are times, like with anything else, that the communication might not be that great. So 99% of the time, I want that communication to be there, because I know there will be that 1% where I don't see the message, or I don't, get the message, or I don't have time to respond as fast as I would want to. So I think, like you said, that communication is really a
Yep.
big key with what you're talking about. And I don't want to keep you all morning, Mike. I mean, I tell you, I could really talk about this like friggin' forever. Just thinking about the things that I've learned over the years, and you sharing these stories back and forth. I think I'm hoping listeners are going to get something out of this. Kind of take little nuggets of what we're talking about. Even when
Absolutely.
when they sit the next preceptor, or if you are a preceptor in FTO, when you sit with your next student, some things to sort of think about here. So before we go, I want to maybe just get your final thought for people listening, or if they're watching live. Um, if they're looking to be better at leadership, right, and grow in their careers,
Hmm.
what's sort of like a final thought you can give them, to sort of get on that path to get there?
Well,
I know it's a long path. There's a lot of moving
that's
parts,
there's
but maybe like
exactly,
something
but
that they're struggling. You know what I mean? There's something that maybe
yeah,
you can tell the listener that can maybe get them going.
I'm going to try to keep this as succinct as I can.
Yeah.
But it may take a few minutes to get the whole thing out. And again, it all ties into that CME that I do. Um, if you want to grow, you need to begin with leading yourself. If you're having trouble understanding or knowing what leading yourself is, communicate that to somebody. That somebody should be particularly a mentor, a coach. And as you progress through your career path and your ladder and you climb, you're going to need different coaches and different mentors at different points of the game. So communicate those things. Have a mindset that you want to grow. Have a mindset where you read things, you ask things, you question, you challenge yourself. Become incrementally better each day. The old saying of 1% better each day. Over the course of the year, you're going to be incrementally better. There's a statistical curve in math. I'm not a mathematician, but you can search that out online. And the biggest thing, empathy. Don't have sympathy for someone. They don't need your pity. They need you to understand where they are, what they're doing. Meet them there. And when you meet them there, they will open up and be more receptive to you instead of having to be antagonistic, and they'll help you get through it. The biggest thing is we've seen, unfortunately, over our years, too many people with either PTSD that ends in suicide or that ends in a career stopping moment. Please, 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 if you need help, ask for it. Again, that's that communication. It's got to be two ways. And it's not just as a leader simply hearing it. You need to close that loop. You need to take action on it. You don't need to start off the conversation with the, hey, how are you doing? Oh, I'm miserable. My mother's in the hospital. Oh, okay. I heard you. Your mother's in the hospital. You got to finish up with action saying, hey, can I do anything for you? Do you need a day off? Do you need to go home? Follow through with that. Work on constantly developing yourself and keeping in touch. Know one of the sayings that somebody has at the bottom of their email is signature block is EMS is a team sport. It works when we're all in this together. Support each other, build each other, and if you need help, there's people like myself that are out there that are willing to help you. And you and I are both examples of you can be in this career for a long time. It can be a career. You might choose to have it as a stepping stone, but you don't have to be out of this career that quickly.
Right. Yeah. Well, great information, Mike. I really appreciate it. I was thinking before you're talking about how you type something up, to help you remember what you had to do
Yeah.
back in the day, and I mean, I started doing the same thing. That's what started me on my websites and stuff, was the fact that there was always these little pieces missing, and I was
Yes.
trying to fill in these pieces for people that went a little bit beyond regular schooling and regular operational stuff at work. I was thinking, if you and I did that, I'm sure there's a lot of other medics out there and EMTs out there that did the same thing. I was just starting to wonder. I wonder if I was able to compile everyone's stuff, how big that book would be. Everyone
That's
getting
yep.
their own little cheat sheets that they created because it
Cheat sheets and
wasn't there.
YouTube channels.
Yeah, yeah. I just wonder. All right, Mike. Listen, I'm going to end it there, man. Again, I really appreciate it. Anyone listening, watching, I appreciate if you joined us live. If you're watching a recording of this or listen to a recording of this, be sure to check out Mike's LinkedIn channel. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Go check him out, follow him, and get some more information about all the stuff that he's doing. He's got some great content there on LinkedIn. You can get a lot more information and sort of learning how to be a better leader and communicating and getting that mindset that he talks about. All right, Mike, that's it. As
Appreciate it.
always, I appreciate it, man. All right, everybody, that's it for me. As always, I am Jim Hoffman from EMS Office Hours. Stay safe.